they have to withstand scrutiny just like anybody else trying to prove a case. Just like anybody else. Doesn't mean you don't believe them, but guess what? They have to stand up to scrutiny. You're going to see Garth Brooks go after this case guns a-blazing. There's nothing in the complaint to corroborate what she's saying. This is just her word and her word alone. But what is evidence? People say all the time, well, there's no evidence against me. Well, somebody's talking against you. Oral testimony is a form of evidence, and pulled her into the next room and onto the bed where she could not escape his physical domination. Well, if that's true, he needs to go to prison. Okay, so here's the thing. I'm a celebrity. I'm a big name celebrity. Guess what you have to do if you're a celebrity? Protect yourself at every damn turn. Every turn. Every turn. Turn around, there's somebody wanting their hand in your pocket. Now, is this to say that Jane Roe, who is suing Garth Brooks for sexual assault, does that mean that she's not telling the truth? Not necessarily.
Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. Who is he? Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And who is he? Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And what he do? And he's gonna react to all the self-snitching.
Hi, this is Bruce Rivers. Welcome to another fun-filled episode of Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers, your board-certified criminal defense lawyer. You are a personal board-certified criminal defense lawyer, along with our content genius, Michael Rivers, the man behind the plan, the man behind the camera, the man in front of the camera, behind the microphone, and the man who is responsible for everything. Michael, do we have any merch left?
We have plenty.
Where can you find
of
that?
merch.
Where can they find that?
They can go to clrbrucerivers.com.
All right. So you go to clrbrucerivers.com for our merch. And today we're going to talk a little bit about Garth Brooks and his friends that he found in the lowest of places. All right, that's a little cheesy, a little cringe. I actually just got a chill about how cringy that sounded. But notwithstanding that, before we get to that, this is brought to you by our loyal sponsor, eforms.com. eforms.com. Sit your grandma's downstairs, listen to a little bit of Garth Brooks and starting to really get turned on by the music, and she kind of goes a little bit nuts, and she breaks her hip. That's what happened to my grandma when she listens to Garth Brooks. Well, guess what? While she's in the hospital, she still has to manage her online presence, right? So she needs a power of attorney. Where would I get that? I would get that from eforms.com. eforms.com, you can get a power of attorney, bill of sale, rental agreement, any kind of legal form that you need. Go to eforms.com, because guess what it does? eforms.com, it protects you in court, out of court. If it's writing, you can't argue with the document. It also prevents you from having to hire a high-priced lawyer. So eforms.com, a very effective way to protect yourself in and out of court and to avoid the high cost of a lawyer. All right, so that's eforms.com. Don't forget to go there. Okay, so here's the thing. I'm a celebrity. I'm a big name celebrity. Guess what you have to do if you're fucking celebrity? Protect yourself at every goddamn turn. Every turn. Every turn. Turn around, there's somebody wanting their hand in your pocket. You turn this way, you got somebody with their hand in your pocket. Oh, by the way, you got another pocket? I'm going to put my hand in that one too. They're targets. They're absolute targets. Now, is this to say that Jane Roe, who is suing Garth Brooks for sexual assault, does that mean that she's not telling the truth? Not necessarily. Does it mean she is telling the truth? Not necessarily. But I will tell you this. All right, let's get into what the allegations are. The allegations are that this woman who worked for Garth Brooks in 2019 or 18, somewhere around that time period, did his hair and makeup. First started working for his wife, then started doing his hair and makeup, and he does the Harvey Weinstein thing, right? He just shows up out of the shower with an erection. Oh, look at this. You want to play with this? And I didn't realize this, but Garth Brooks supposedly is 6 foot, 300 pounds. I mean, he's a big dude. He's not a little guy. And this gal, she's 5 foot, 100 pounds, evidently. And one of the allegations is that he takes her by the ankles and he has intercourse with her upside down. I'm still trying to figure out from this complaint how the heck that looks and how that's possible. I have you upside down like this, whether you're facing me or away from me. How am I going to do that? I'm just having a little trouble visualizing how this works. but she continued to work for him. And then she moves to Mississippi, and then she continues to ask for money. Ask for a lot of money and health benefits, even though she's not working for him. So apparently this person, Jane Roe, and Jane Roe is not her real name. So prior to this complaint coming public, Garth Brooks had filed an injunction against her in Mississippi. And what he was looking for in that, a declaratory judgment that the defendant's allegation against him of sexual misconduct are untrue. Court's not going to grant him that. Compensatory damages caused by the defendant's intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, and false light in privacy of including incidental and consequential damages, punitive damages in amounts sufficient to deter similar future behavior, preliminary and permanent injunctive relief prohibiting the defendant from continuing her extortion behavior and from further publicizing her false allegations against plaintiff's reasonable attorney costs, prejudgment and post-judgment interest, such other relief as this court deems just. So, so what Garth Brooks essentially, he's listed as John Doe or whatever he's listed as, and he's listed her as Jane Roe. That happens a lot of times in these civil suits. If she doesn't want to be named, out in the public, so we don't know her name. We only know that she filed her complaint as Jane Roe. And so he's seeking injunctive relief. That's basically a court order preventing somebody from doing something or, ordering them to do something. And in this case, stop spreading lies about me. Don't file anything more, blah, blah, blah. So soon after moving to Mississippi, defendant apparently encountered financial... Now, she's the defendant in this lawsuit. So this is Jane Roe. Soon after moving to Mississippi, defendant apparently encountered financial difficulties and asked plaintiff, Garth Brooks, for financial assistance. Plaintiff complied out of loyalty, friendship, and a desire to improve defendant's condition, but defendant's demands for financial assistance only increased, with the defendant ultimately asking plaintiff for a salaried employment and medical benefits. When plaintiff advised he could not agree to the defendant's demands for salaried employment and medical benefits, she responded with false allegations and outrageous allegations of sexual misconduct she claims occurred years ago. Which is kind of telling. Why wouldn't you go to the cops? Let's just start there. Oh, because he's a powerful person and I'm just a little old me. Okay, fair enough. But then you continue to work for him. Why is that? Because I needed the money and he's a powerful person and it's just little old me. Okay, fine. But you asked for money from him, right? Yeah? Well, and he didn't want to give it to you, yeah? Well, then it was after that you hurled these threats. Why did you wait all that time? Why did you wait 5 years? That's the problem I have with these kinds of lawsuits. They're tainted. They're tainted with the extortion smell. Does that seem right? Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I mean.
Did you know that Garth Brooks is the #1 most selling solo artist with 157 million certified albums in the sales in the U.S.? He's the #1 solo artist.
So he's huge.
Yeah,
he's huge, and this, she's not getting them, and this appears to be clear from the paperwork. She asks for money, doesn't get it, and then sues him. These people are targets. How much would it cost him to have somebody there recording him or at least being a witness? You never should be alone with a woman if you're one of these kinds of celebrities. A woman that's not your spouse, right? I mean, almost impossible because of what might happen. We look at what the allegations are here. And they're spicy. They're really spicy. Looked up in horror as he walked out of the shower, naked with an erection, forces her hand onto him, basically. Brooks appallingly told Miss Rowe that he had fantasized about this moment and wanted her to perform oral on her so that he could relieve himself all over her face while she had her glasses on. It's not exactly what it says, but Miss Rowe could not believe that he had booked a hotel suite. I mean, with only one room. Tragically, her worst fears came true when seconds later he was towering over. I mean, this really reads like a bad novel, honestly. His 6-foot frame, almost 300 pounds, ready to pounce on Miss Rowe, who was less than 5 feet and 100 pounds. As she began to panic, he grabbed her hands and pulled her into the next room and onto the bed where she could not escape his physical domination. Well, if that's true, he needs to go to prison. But Brooks even held her small body upside down by her feet and penetrated her. Where? I mean, I just have a hard time with the mechanics of that.
So 300 versus 100 pounds lifting, maybe
But I mean, I just have a problem with the mechanics.
Yeah.
Just think about how that would work. I mean, I'm not saying that he wasn't strong enough to do that.
Yeah.
But what I am saying is, so if we look at this case, you know, I think we're going to see a Johnny Depp kind of situation here, honestly. I think we're going to see a situation where you got somebody like Garth Brooks who's going to stand up to her. One of the things you'd think there'd be all kinds of text messages between the two of them, right? You know, oh, I love you, baby. I want to do this. And then, but she apparently says that on one occasion that Garth Brooks went in and erased all of her text messages, but not all of them. Other stuff. I mean, I'm not trying to be so sensationalistic about this, but it does kind of help to see what the allegations are. He openly talked about sexual subjects in front of Miss Rowe, including, for example, cunnilingus. Brooks regularly changed his clothing in front of Miss Rowe. You know, if you are doing a show and she's doing your hair and makeup, although I can't imagine she's doing his fucking hair because, number one, I don't think he's got a lot of hair, and number two, he always wears a hat. But you would think that there would be some of that going on if you're changing costumes and whatever. But in any event, regularly changed his clothing in front of Miss Rowe and often purposely exposed his genitals and buttocks to Miss Rowe, knowing that she would be respond with a look of horror and disgust. Oh my God, there's an ass. There's a penis. Brooks repeated the sexual fantasy he said when he came out of the shower with an erection and forced her hand to his penis to Miss Rowe and forced her to listen to other sexual fantasies he had about her performing acts on him. But here's the thing that I think is interesting. Brooks sent Miss Rowe sexually explicit text messages and pressured her to engage in sexting with him. But then she says later in the complaint that not only did he delete those messages off of her phone, which is suspicious, but he also would contact her from other devices with other names, so that and then would tell her, I'm going to contact you under this name. It just seems so calculated, and so I don't have any evidence of what you're talking about because he destroyed it all, but it existed. That's what I have a problem with. Guess what? If you have the phone, you can get those text messages back. You can do forensics on those phones. And here's the other thing. A couple of the instances that she puts in here supposedly were witnessed by other people that are on his team. So if they witnessed it, certainly there'll be a witness for them, right? There's nothing in the complaint to corroborate what she's saying. This is just her word and her word alone. But what is evidence? People say all the time, well, there's no evidence against me. Well, somebody's talking against you. Oral testimony is a form of evidence, period. You don't always have to, and this is like a crim sex case, but it is a civil case. So the burden of proof is different in a civil case than a criminal case. Criminal case, what is it, class? Proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the highest proof in our system, right? But in a criminal case or a civil case, it is just a preponderance of the evidence. Slightly more true than not, like 50.01%. That's all they have to prove. You're gonna see Garth Brooks go after this case, guns a-blazing. You're gonna see it because they're gonna ask for her phone that she used. They're gonna ask for all kinds of other things. And guess what? If it's not available, if she somehow threw the phone away, which I bet that's going to happen, I bet you're going to see that not only will there's a thing called spoliation. If somebody throws evidence away, you can get an adverse inference instruction or some kind of sanctions against the person who's getting rid of the evidence, right? So in this particular case, you're going to have a situation where they are going to put her to her burden. And now, I hate these kinds of cases because the timing just seems so suspicious. You know what I mean? I mean, I like Garth Brooks, but I don't like him so much that I would just say, oh, he would never do this, because who the fuck knows? I mean, look at how crazy Diddy's crap is, you know? And so you kind of look at the timing of this, and that bothers me a little bit. And I think it should bother everybody. But anybody, whether they're a female victim of sexual assault, you know, they have to withstand scrutiny just like anybody else trying to prove a case. Just like anybody else. Doesn't mean you don't believe them, but guess what? They have to stand up to scrutiny. This is a he said, she said case. And she says, okay, there's people, there's an incident they talk about a dildo with, a shampoo bottle shaped like a dildo. I mean, and where they talk about it. And she was really disgusted by this comment that supposedly Garth Brooks made. But apparently he made this in front of his wife, in front of his manager or some other people on his staff. So that should be corroborated by her, right? Because that's what she says. And if nobody corroborates that, that's an issue. Why don't they corroborate it? Because they're on his payroll, because blah, blah, blah. Well, you can't have it both ways. You got, and her allegations do not have to be corroborated. I want to get that out there. She has to prove her case up, and however she does that to the satisfaction of a jury, it just has to be a preponderance of the evidence. So Garth Brooks has responded to this statement in basically saying that he's been hassled to no ends with threats, lies, and tragic tales of what my future would be if I did not write a check for many millions of dollars. It has been like having a loaded gun waved in my face. I like that statement. I mean, because he's going to be able to prove that she's been trying to extort money from him for a long time. Why didn't she go to the cops? Why didn't she? And that's actually a weak argument, honestly, from his side. So if he's defending against allegations like this, why didn't you go to the police? Well, because I was really afraid of you, and I didn't want this to be public. But I wanted you to have to pay for the damage you've done. That's, people a lot of times don't want to come forward, but they do come forward. A lot of people do come forward. The problem that I have is the whole fucking timing of this thing. I have a problem with her trying to extort money, and I'd like to see the communication. We don't have the communications between them about the money on the front end of this. I'd like to see what those things are like. Because if those are just, look, I'm down and out, blah, 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 can you help me out? And he says, yeah. And all of a sudden she wants more money, which is what he's saying in his lawsuit against her. Well, and it's not enough. Is she saying, for what you did to me? Kind of like what Sarah Boone said, for everything you've done to me. You remember that? Which we'll get to her in a minute. But we're going to do a reaction to Sarah Boone testified, and so we'll do a reaction to that. So when you look at these lawsuits, she starts out kind of a little bit of a hole, in my opinion. She starts by asking for money, and that's not enough. So then she asks for more. She originally started working more for Garth Brooks because she was down and out on money. And so he hires her, and maybe he's a little off color. Maybe he is a little insensitive, and maybe he is trying to do whatever he's doing. I don't know about the sexual assault, and I'm not going to really comment on it. It's he said versus she said, and maybe she's got other things to document. Well, I was here at this time. I was here at this time. I remember this because this is what I was wearing, and I have his semen on my shirt. That's physical evidence. I mean, she doesn't have that. But I mean, if she did, that would be huge. But she doesn't. I guarantee you she doesn't, because it would be named in the lawsuit. And they would ask for his DNA, under a subpoena ducis tecum. That's when you subpoena either a thing or you can subpoena documents. And so, this is going to be a long, drawn-out civil lawsuit. And I hope the people who are her lawyers are ready for a battle. Seems like they're on Fifth Avenue in New York, so they're probably a pretty decent law firm. But and the creative writing that was implored in this complaint is without typos, so I'll give him that. But it's very creative and it's very invective. This is designed to do one thing and one thing only, and that's embarrass and coerce money out of a celebrity. But when you're a celebrity, you are a target. I've represented athletes that were targets, especially these young guys that get a big contract. Guess who wants to get pregnant, and get $20,000 a month for child support? I mean, I've seen that happen to a client of mine, and it was just insane. So when you look at this lawsuit, you've got the number one selling artist of all time, worth about $400 million. That is huge. He's a target. And, this is all over the news. I mean, some of this stuff almost, you can lift it right out of Harvey Weinstein's allegations. You've got the diddler. You've got the number one selling artist of all time, she's been working for this family since 99. So 10 years later, I've been fantasizing about this my whole life. I mean, I almost sounded like Homer Simpson there for a second. I mean, really? I mean, you're fantasizing about her. I'm not buying it yet. Maybe you've got some compelling story. And let me tell you what's going to happen is this woman's going to get on the stand. She's going to have some tears. She's going to start crying. And she's going to, they're going to take her deposition. Or she's not going to cry. Her demeanor on the stand will either win or lose this case. And you're going to see a fiery shitstorm coming from Garth Brooks' camp. I'd be shocked if you didn't. And they're gonna do. So when you have one of these lawsuits, one of the things you get is discovery. This is why I hate civil cases. Civil discovery is so arduous. It takes time, it takes money, it takes a lot of effort to pull everything together. So there's a thing called interrogatories. Those are written questions. They got requests for admissions. Those are things that you have to answer, otherwise they're deemed admitted. You've got demand for the production of documents or things. And then you're going to have depositions. So, and then you could have more interrogatories. So those are written questions that you can pose to the other side that they have, and all that's done under oath. So if you think your client's lying, you better damn well make sure that you're not aiding and abetting lies under oath.
Yeah, I do have a question for you. So he probably has a stellar legal team, right? But she probably took it on a contingency, right, basis.
Well, she doesn't have any money.
Yeah, that's the thing.
So you've got a situation. That's a good point, Michael.
Yeah.
So you've got a situation where, okay, well, who's paying her legal bills? They take it on the come. In other words, you get a situation where they don't get paid unless she gets paid. Remember Paula Jones? Remember that case? She got $800,000 from Clinton's insurance. He had a fucking insurance policy against such things. Who knew? And her lawyers basically ate that all up because they billed hourly. And once they got the money, they just ate it up, and she got almost nothing. So I would bet they're taking this on a percentage. So in other words, and it's probably 40, 50%. I guarantee you they're not going to do this for a third. I just would be shocked if that was the case. But Garth Brooks, on the other hand, he's defending this on an hourly basis and probably has a team, and those bills add up like nobody's business. So regardless, he's going to be going into his pocket to the tune of millions of dollars without question. So this has been our reaction to Garth Brooks facing criminal, well, it is criminal. I mean, he's facing a civil lawsuit, but the things that she alleges in the complaint are criminal in nature and, never been reported to the cops. So we'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts. Make sure you follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, sign up for Patreon, look at Facebook. We'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts. Also, where do we get the merch, Michael?
Go to CLRBruceRivers.com. We've got all sorts of stuff you can see here on the screen, so go check it out.
All right, see you next time. Criminal Lawyer Reacts. Hi, this is Bruce Rivers. Welcome to another fun-filled episode of Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers, board-certified criminal defense lawyer. Today we're reacting to the judge's order on Andrew Tate. But before we do that, this is brought to you by eSign.com. eSign.com. eSign.com is an excellent way to have documents signed remotely. You don't have to come into your office. You can get it signed remotely and execute whatever transaction you're trying to do. Today we are reacting to the judge's order on Andrew Tate. I've gotten some backlash from some incels on our channel about Andrew Tate. I had one guy say, so sad that a lawyer is jealous of Andrew Tate. He'll never reach his level. I hope not. I don't want to be in a Romanian jail cell where 56 other guys are in the same toilet that's in the middle of the fucking room. I hope I don't reach his level. Some of the detractors have been saying that I take things out of context and, what color is your Bugatti? And whatever. And so I am going to kind of break down what the judge said. And I think I already did a thing about taking things out of context. But let's talk about what the judge focused on in determining the decision to keep him detained. First of all, Romania is a country that's part of the International Convention Against Sex Trafficking. So they're trying to standardize things across the globe because sex trafficking by its nature is borderless. In other words, if everybody has the same type of structure against sex trafficking, it should work as a kind of a global thing to prevent it. If there's a safe haven for sex traffickers, that's where they'll go. So that's what the idea is between that international convention. First, the judge references the definition of human trafficking and the protocol regarding prevention and repression and punishment. Human trafficking, especially of women and children, in addition to the United Nations Convention. The judge starts out by talking about the definition and where the law comes from. But then he starts talking about concrete danger for the public that they present. And even if the defendants are not known with criminal past, the charge represents a state of normality that cannot justify, in context of the present case, the release of the defendants at this procedural moment in relation to the high gravity of the alleged crime of human trafficking and the creation of a criminal group organized for which they are investigated. And then the other thing he talks about in the order is the judge talks about, we had that stuff that had happened in London. Well, the judge says even though that's not a crime, it cannot be ignored. So he's using that, and he fled to this jurisdiction, and he's also using the fact that he's talked in videos and flaunting flight. He talks about that in his order.
If I fuck up and England wants me in jail, I can fly on a Nigerian passport, or an American, or an English, or a Polish, or an Estonian. I have so many passports. What, are you going to block them all?
Everything he is doing is consistent. But here's even the kicker. Looking at private videos that are part of the police file, from the following passages from the context of this content, there is no doubt a deep lack of respect for the legal norms and a total indifference to the social protected values that the defendant gives proof of.
Oh no, not a court in Romania. Internationally respected Romanian courts. Put me in jail.
Get me out of jail. The law says you're guilty. I said get me out of jail. Don't go see a lawyer to talk about the law. I have committed multiple felonies. How much does it cost to make this all go away?
But also the attitude of disregard towards women in general, which he perceives only as a mean of getting his content released. In other words, making money. The judge cannot agree with the support of the defense in the sense that the video contents presents only one character and cannot be taken into account since the defendant exhibits the same attitude in the relations with the injured persons and is evident from the content of the conversations that are in these criminal prosecution files. The defense had made an argument. You can't really look at what he's saying on those videos because that's just a character that he's playing. Well, the judge has also looked at some private files. And the judge says, I can't ignore it. You know, you look in some of the thing, he shows you his 7 passports. I mean, who has 7 passports? And if you look at, we'll show you some video in a minute about the search. You look at the guns, you look at the passports, you look at all the other things that are on the table. He's ready to rock and roll. I mean, why does he need all this stuff? Well, I'll tell you why. Because he fled one jurisdiction, and he's worried about people coming after him. Cops in general. Regarding the need to prevent the commission of another crime, purpose mentioned in enumerated paragraph 202, blah, blah, blah. The judge notes the situation by which his conduct prior to committing the act is the subject of the case. The defendant proves the real risk of repeat criminal behavior. The judge is basically saying is, if you look at some of the recent statements put out by his camp, Andrew Tate has nothing but the utmost respect for law and authority, nothing but the most respect for the Romanian courts.
Oh no, not a court in Romania.
Of course they're going to say that now, but what did he flaunted it on his video. He absolutely flaunted it. Andrew Tate's videos that he made are completely biting him in the ass. When somebody tells you who they are, believe them. When Andrew Tate tells you he's got 7 passports because he could go to Romania, I could go to Bulgaria, I could go to Sudan, wherever the fuck he says he's going to go. He's so full of shit. You know, and the thing that kills me, honestly, about this guy in general is the hubris. And he not only preys on these women, but he preys on these young guys with no self-esteem, and they just think he's the bee's knees. Oh, look, he's driving a Bugatti, you know, and he's doing this, he's doing that, and he just has money, hand over fist. Well, you can make money hand over fist, but if you have to look over your shoulder, that's called short money. It's absolutely short money. And so anybody out there who's paying $50 a month to Hustle University, which I don't think exists anymore, is someone that needs to look elsewhere for motivation and support. In that motivation that you're looking for, look at what he did. He started out being successful as a fighter. You don't make a lot of money as a professional kickboxer. He wound up with, when he got done with the fight game, he had 70 grand to his name. He blew 30 of it trying to gamble it to try to get a place in Thailand, and it was left with $40,000 left. He was going for the quick money. He was selling drugs for a short time.
But fighting wasn't paying the bills, sold drugs, whatever.
And then he does this webcam thing and didn't do it. I mean, the webcam business is not illegal by itself. But to do it the way he did it, and with the deception and the fraud that he engaged in, because that's his MO. That's his MO. He has to get the quick money because he didn't have the skill. Why, you know, I want to say he didn't have the skill set to do it right, but he probably did. But just he got greedy, and you know, I mean, why would you tie up all your money in 33 cars, as he said? I think they just seized another 4 vehicles. He's put himself in a very vulnerable position by engaging in criminal activity. When you break the law, you give the government a foray into your life, right? You just do, because you give the government the ability to then control your life. And who's controlling where he is and what he's doing. Had he done this the proper way, and I don't know what that means exactly because I'm not in the webcam business. The guys that are looking at him as an idol, and there are a lot of you out there. I don't have, Bugatti money. But you know what? If I had to do what Andrew Tate did, I wouldn't want Bugatti money. Even if I had that kind of money, I wouldn't fucking buy a Bugatti. When you set up your program, whatever your program is, go to work, start your own business, whatever you're doing, you got to do it so that it isn't like Andrew. He's vulnerable himself, okay? Let's look at what he did. His first victims were addicts, right? Drug addicts. Second victims, and he's always doing something in the back of people. The second victims were the ladies that he was keeping there. And I know some people said they were free to leave at any time. Bullshit. They wouldn't have a case if they weren't. You got 6 people who said they weren't. But then the third victim was you guys. You guys had signed up for Hustler University. You were hustled. I mean, you were online, and he was feeding what you needed to hear. And unfortunately, it was BS. It was absolutely BS. You know, I know it's fashionable in some circles to be full of bravado and say, oh, my bitch is doing this or that, and have this persona. But you know what's even better than that is being revered for being a hard-working son of a bitch and providing for the people around you and having their admiration. That short circle of people. And there's nothing beats that. You know, I have a family that sits around me, and I try to make sure every one of them is taken care of. And I do it through legitimate means. And, you know, it wasn't easy for me to go to law school. You know, when I went to law school, I had shitty grades coming out of college. I didn't think I'd get in. And when I got in, I thought they were going to put their hand on my shoulder and say, look, we made a mistake. But I worked my ass off, and I really liked law school, and I grinded it out. And it was like 7 years between my first year of college until the end of law school. And by doing that, guess what? I was able to set up my law practice, and I've been doing this for 25 years, and I have all the trappings of a good life. That is solid. That's where you need to be. So when you look at the decisions that Andrew Tate has made, he's made his bed. And his bed is right now with about 56 other guys in a single room with a toilet in the middle. The next phase for him will be to face the charges, and we'll follow this. So he isn't getting out. The judge has used his videos against him that were in the police file, rejected all the defense, and I wouldn't be shocked if all of a sudden he winds up with new lawyers, because that's the kind of guy that he is. Unless off camera he's really understanding how much trouble he's in. I heard this. I don't know if this is accurate or not. I heard he could be looking at up to 14 years. I don't know if that's true or not. All I know is he is looking at a boatload of time. He's looking at the better part of 10 years. And at the end of the day, just be good to the people around you. Work your ass off. You know, have a program that can't, you don't have to look behind you. So we'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts. Make sure you subscribe. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Patreon. And we'll see you next time here on... Hi, this is Bruce Rivers. Welcome to another episode of Criminal Lawyer Reacts, CLR. I'm Bruce Rivers, board-certified criminal defense lawyer. And today we're reacting to K-Flock. Now, we did a reaction to one of his songs recently, and that was Is You Ready? And if you remember, that was about 2-3 weeks ago, and I can't make this stuff up. How is it that he just got picked up on December 16th for a homicide? Now, what he did was he was in a barbershop. Now, we're going to play the video here for you so you can see what we're talking about. But he's in a barbershop. There's some exchange between he and another patron of the barbershop, and he walks out, and then the other guy follows him. And then somehow he gets shot, and we'll talk a little bit more about, the facts surrounding it, because they're not quite clear is exactly what happened. And then he's charged with 3 counts. 3 counts. 1 count of second-degree intentional murder, and he's charged with second-degree criminal possession of a weapon. 2 counts of that. And we'll talk about more what the penalties are and that kind of thing. But let's take a look at the video, because he's in New York, and he's coming out of this barber shop. So now, this video that's been posted all over the internet doesn't really show Kevin Perez, a.k.a. K-Flock. But it does show a reaction by other folks. So you get kind of a timing of what's going on. So these people probably heard the gunshot, and now they're reacting to it. Now, remember what I told you. There's video cameras all over just about every city in America. Now, let's just look at, there's a couple things I want to go over with you. First of all, what is he charged with? The first count, he's charged with murder in the second degree. Murder, the second degree, is one of the most significant crimes in New York State and just about any other state. It is called an A1 felony, and you could very likely get a life sentence if you're convicted. And even if you don't get a life sentence, there's a mandatory minimum sentence of 15 to 40 years. It's called indeterminate sentencing. Next, he's also charged with criminal possession of a firearm. In New York, you can't just own or possess in public, for that matter, a firearm. You have to have a permit. And it carries with it a 15-year penalty, but there's a mandatory minimum penalty of 3.5 years. So, and that's something that the judge doesn't have any discretion with whatsoever. It's called mandatory sentencing. And in that particular instance, if you are, like, let's say you're just caught with a firearm at the airport, for example, it's what they call a strict liability crime. And it sort of assumes you have 0 criminal history score. And if the judge doesn't have any discretion, and you're looking at a 3.5-year sentence, I mean, they take their gun laws extremely seriously in New York. So let's just take a look at the picture. You can see here that Mr. Perez is wearing some very distinctive clothing. And that's one of the things that cops will do, is that they'll have a supposed expert, because I can see a stripe here and there's a stripe here. You know, it's more common sense than anything else. But that is probably how he was identified. We tried looking for the criminal complaint. I couldn't pull it up for whatever reason at this point, but we'll get that, and then we'll analyze the facts that are embedded within that. However, I will tell you something about what his lawyers are saying. K-Flac's attorney is a guy by the name of Scott Lehman. I don't know him, but he released a statement, and it says, "We have begun our own investigation into these allegations. More importantly, considering the DA's significant disclosure this morning that the NYPD received a tip saying someone else is the shooter, we demanded that the DA's office promptly provide disclosure of the videos referenced in the complaint and more information on the tip." Kevin Perez, a.k.a. K-Flock, went into a barbershop. And the way the story goes is that the person that was in there said, "What are you looking at?" And he walked out. And then the person that was in there walked after him. Now, remember what I said about closing the gap? The only problem is that the guy that was following him was shot in the neck and in the back. Now, that could happen in a number of ways, obviously. But in this particular instance, if he was, if someone's chasing you and they're closing the gap, that makes a plausible self-defense more likely. And remember what I said about self-defense. Self-defense, once they get the instruction, the jury gets the instruction about self-defense, self-defense is something that the prosecution has to prove you didn't do. So in other words, it's presumed. The defense has to put up some plausible showing of self-defense in order to get the instruction. But once you get the instruction, they have to basically prove a negative. They have to prove that you didn't act in self-defense and that what you did was disproportionate to whatever threat there was. And they have to disprove each element of self-defense. So I don't think the final chapter has been written on this one yet. He's got great representation. He just signed a deal with Capitol Records. The DOA tape is, the latest album, and we did the Is You Ready, and Op Spotter is another one on that, and it's pretty popular. And so to see him face such serious charges at a young age of 18 when he's got nothing but, up on his way. But like I said, we'll see what happens, because if someone's chasing you, you have the right to defend yourself. And if that person's armed, which we don't know he is or isn't, you have the right to defend yourself. And in this particular instance, just because the guy shot in the back and shot in the neck does not mean that the guy was necessarily running away. I mean, you can turn in an instant, and it can happen. I don't know exactly where in his back he was shot. This is all, too early. But it seems to me that his own team seems to think they may have a plausible case of self-defense. But here's the deal. Even if he walks on the homicide, he still may be on the hook for the other two crimes. The second-degree possession of a firearm in public. And I told you what the penalties are. I mean, he could be looking at some serious time on that regardless. So, like I said, the final chapter is not written yet on this. And we'll follow it. And, I want you guys just to take a real hard look at this. He's 18 years old. And he may not have been able to avoid this situation. He just may not have been able to. We don't know yet. And it sounds like there's a tipster who said somebody else was doing the shooting. So we don't know that yet either. It's just all too early to tell. But to be facing such a heavy thing at such a young age, better off try to avoid situations where that could occur. And that's my advice to every one of you guys out there. So that's our wrapper update for today. That was Kevin Perez, aka K-Flock, and we'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts. If you are watching this, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, sign up for Patreon, spread the message, and we'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts. Hi, this is Bruce Rivers. Welcome to another episode of Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers, board-certified criminal defense lawyer. This episode is brought to you by eforms.com. eforms.com. Now, the nice thing about eforms.com, if you need a lease, you need a business agreement, you need a power of attorney, you need any kind of form you're looking for, go to eforms.com and they have you fixed up. Kind of matches with our legal theme, right? Anyway, today we are reacting to Steve Bannon. Now, Steve Bannon is charged by the federal government with 2 counts of contempt. Now, when you get a subpoena, let's say you get a subpoena just from your local county courthouse, and the prosecutor subpoenas you to court, or even the defense subpoenas you to court, and you don't show up for court. Well, that subpoena is a court order. It's an order. And in this case, the subpoena is a congressional order. And it's an enforceable order. And how do you enforce an order? Well, you enforce it by jailing the person until they comply, or, in this case, charging them with criminal contempt. And he has a right to a jury trial. But Steve Bannon is charged with 2 counts. Why is he charged with 2 counts? 1, he failed to show up for his testimony. And number 2, he failed to produce the documents that they were looking for. Now, this is the January 6th committee that is investigating this. They started selecting a jury, I think, on Monday. They selected a jury very quickly. In the federal system, the judge does most of the questions. Voir dire is the process of selecting a jury. But it's really jury deselection. You really kick people off the jury that you can't think are fair. And in this case, it's kind of funny because Bannon is very well known in conservative circles, but overall, people kind of don't know who he is. And that's one of the things that they found out in jury selection. People don't know who he is. So you get 12 jurors and usually 1 alternate. So the government yesterday did their opening statement. And it was pretty cut and dry. And they had I think the prosecutor is a female who's pregnant, which you don't really want to try a case and go hard at somebody who's pregnant because they seem sympathetic. But this is a fairly simple and straightforward case. And what do I always say? Stop self-snitching. You don't want to get on camera. You don't want to talk, whatever. But this is really political grandstanding by Steve Bannon. I mean, that's really what he does. He's all about, boisterous, stop the steal. This is, it was rigged. Joe Biden's not a legitimate president, And we'll get into that a little bit. But let's kind of react. He was out in the courthouse yesterday, and the government's rested their case today. And we'll go into a little bit more about what the government had to prove, but let's see what his little rant is all about. These are kind of funny, actually.
Thompson today to have the courage to come to this courthouse. If he's going to charge somebody with a crime, he's going to be man enough to show up here or send somebody like Shifty Shift.
See, he's attacking Congress. Now, Congress didn't charge him with a crime. The Department of Justice did. Totally different bodies, totally different branches of government.
Or Fang Swalwell, or send Liz Cheney, send somebody on the committee that has the guts to come here and accuse somebody of a crime.
So, Steve Bannon is just ranting outside the courthouse. Now, here's the thing. I don't care whether you're a Trump supporter or whether you're a Biden supporter or whether you're an independent and hate them both. When you have somebody that's attacking our system, right? It's got to be met with a critical eye in a sense. The judge in this case said, number one, you can't subpoena members of Congress because none of what the issue is so narrow in this case. None of what they have to say would be relevant to whether or not you responded to a subpoena. That's the only issue in the case. So there's very few witnesses. That's why the government rested today. They also wanted to raise the issue of privilege, and Donald Trump never asserted the privilege, the executive privilege, and it wouldn't have applied to him anyway, for two reasons. One, he didn't work in the White House, and number two, he was a political advisor. He wasn't a cabinet level position, and number two, guess what? The privilege, executive privilege, rests with the sitting president. So nobody ever asserted it. So he couldn't use that as a defense. And now here's the thing. Do you think it's really smart for him to, if you're all about the podcast and you're all about the Alex Jones type hyperbole in the world where you get, you just go off on a tangent like I do sometimes, well, then what he's doing is more branding, But guess what? Anything he says here can certainly be held against him when it comes time for his sentencing, because he will be convicted, unless jury nullification. So let's finish this up here.
It is outrageous. And for them to sit there and try to get a complete hearing and they won't bring in any testimony about FBI involvement, any testimony about DHS involvement, any testimony about any other involvement.
How is any of that relevant to whether or not you responded to a subpoena? It isn't.
And what's driving this? The total and complete illegitimacy of Joe Biden. Trump won. Joe Biden.
So who do you think that statement's for? You think that's for the judge? No. You think that's for his brand? Yes. You think that's for Donald Trump? Sure. Because Donald Trump's sitting on a mountain of cash.
Illegitimate. 50% of the American people believe that.
So 50% of the American people, I don't know that number is accurate, but how many times did they get into court? 61 or 62 times, and they were shot down in almost every single one of those. So, but that's not even the issue. I mean, the legitimacy or illegitimacy of the presidency or whatever, Congress issued a subpoena. They have the power to do it. You might not like it because they're Democrats, but too fucking bad. They have the power to do it. And you get that subpoena and you don't show up, you are subject to contempt citations. And when you get charged with contempt, it's really a very, very simple case to prove. You either did or did not comply. And he was trying to make some kind of argument that, the dates are fungible, that we were negotiating the dates. Well, and then all of a sudden, last minute, just before trial, he agrees to go before the committee. He can't have it both ways, and in this case, the judge didn't even allow that for a defense. So the case. Remember what I was telling you? The case is very simple. The Justice Department rested their case after only calling 2 witnesses. They called Kristen Emmerling from the House Select Committee and FBI agent Stephen Hart. So Stephen Hart is probably I would guess the FBI agent is the one who served the subpoena on. So you have, did he get served? Yeah, he got served. Did he show up? No. Did he produce the documents? No. It's almost that quick. And I don't know what the cross-examination was. They don't have cameras in the courtroom. But tomorrow, if he's going to testify, he would testify tomorrow. And here's the thing. Bannon may start going off on, let's just, I saw a little role play on this morning on CNN, where Bannon, let's just say I'm Bannon and I start going off. Well, this is an illegitimate, blah, 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 blah. Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Bannon, please answer the question that's put before you. Next question, please. Mr. Bannon, did you get served with a subpoena? This is not a legitimate body. It is not a legitimate subpoena. Mr. Bannon, I'm going to tell you, objection. Mr. Bannon, I'm going to tell you one more time. And so, Mr. Bannon, isn't it true that you were served a subpoena and you didn't show up? And then he goes off on his tangent again. Guess what? The judge will clear the courtroom. Okay, Mr. Bannon, I warned you. I am now finding you in contempt, and you're in direct criminal contempt of my order. So, and if it happens right in front of a judge, the judge can order another contempt citation and summarily convict him of contempt right before the federal court, right before the federal bench. And what he's looking at, and the 2 counts are misdemeanors, so they carry with them a year-long sentence each, with a 30-day mandatory minimum. And in federal court, generally speaking, they don't really do a whole lot of concurrent sentences. So if he gets convicted of both, it's likely he will do at least 60 days. But my guess is that with all the ranting and raving outside the courthouse, that he's going to get much more than 60 days. So just keep an eye on this. And this is for our friends in Oregon, because they're political animals. So you know who you are, Emily. And this is for all of our other fans. I know I'm going to get some backlash, like, oh, you're just a Trump hater and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not a Trump hater. I'm fairly middle of the road. I think that, but it doesn't really matter, because this is actually kind of a cool, fun legal issue when you think about it, because it's the federal government. It's got politics involved. And, I think he's going to be singing a different tune when he's sitting in jail for a while. And I wouldn't be surprised if the judge took him into custody right then and there, because once he's convicted, he no longer has the presumption of innocence. And when you don't have the presumption of innocence, you have a different standard in terms of your release conditions. But it is kind of a political environment, and one could argue he could be disrespectful right outside the courthouse. I don't know if the judge is going to take him into custody or not. On much more serious cases, they almost certainly get taken into custody if they were released prior to that. So my guess is that this judge has probably had it with and this is a Trump-appointed judge, and so this Trump-appointed judge has probably had it a little bit with Bannon. I bet he's going to be a little impatient with him. And it all depends upon what he does with the rest of the case. Some judges issue what they call a trial tax. You put the government to their burden, and you especially on a case where you're not going to win, they whack you for going to trials. Other judges don't do that, but there's quite a few that do, and I don't know what this judge would do. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see tomorrow whether he testifies. I bet he $100 that he testifies. Now, the reason I say that is because he wants a headline. He wants a headline that says, Bannon testifies, blah, 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 blah. Or, what's more, he wants the headline that judge shuts down Bannon's testimony. That's what it doesn't matter. Either way, he's going to win, he thinks, the battle of public opinion. And that's where he's fighting this. He's not really fighting this in the courtroom so much. So this has been our reaction to Steve Bannon on trial for contempt. We'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts. My name is Bruce Rivers. I am a board-certified criminal defense lawyer. I love what I do. There's nothing better than sitting next to your client. 1 minute they're looking at 10, 15, 25 years, or even life, and the next minute the government has no hold on them, and they walk out and they sleep in their own bed that night. So that's what I do. I love what I do. So you follow us. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe. Stop the self-snitching. We'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer.